think you're talking to right now? Who is it you think you see? Do you have any idea how much editing I do on my videos? I mean, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. Do you know what would happen if I stopped all of a sudden editing my videos? They'd be longer than the 25 endings of Lord of the Rings. They would disappear, cease to exist. No, you clearly don't understand who you're talking to. So let me clue you in. A guy posts a video of his cat playing with yarn. Clickbait. That's what you think of me? I'm not the one that posts clickbait. I'm the one that posts videos. Edited videos. I am the one who always goes IndieNow. Hello everybody and welcome to our flagship show, Time to Go IndieNow. We are now on episode 29. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I would really appreciate it if you liked, comment, and subscribed as well. And share this video and our channel with everybody and anybody that you know. We really appreciate all your support and love. And without you, we wouldn't be here. So we're very glad to be here giving you another great episode. The intro kind of was Breaking Bad-esque, and I'm a huge fan of that show. I think it's one of the best shows ever made, and it celebrated its 10th anniversary at Comic-Con just recently, and I thought, well, that's kind of apropos of the show that we're putting together here for this episode. Not that we're going to be talking about drug dealers and meth and you know, bad people. That's obviously Breaking Bad owns that, and they can have it as far as I'm concerned. No, what I mean by that is a lot of the characters from Breaking Bad are trying to find themselves. In fact, pretty much all of them are. They think that they're this person, but they're really this person. And when it only clicks for them when they embrace that and become who they're meant to be. And that's, you know, we've always talked about on this show about journeys, choices, but I think moreover is the idea that you were meant to be an artist. And case in point with the interviews that we've presented here in this episode, we have the amazing SALIDAS, who is an author who spent a long time perfecting her craft, and now she is a thoroughbred when it comes to putting material out, and she's a wealth of knowledge, and that all comes from her passion to be what she wanted to be, and she didn't find it right away. It came to her at one point and she kind of pushed it away, and then it came back, and when it came back she embraced it and it became who she is, and that's pretty awesome. You know, we have Ryan Peebles of the band ORYX and CRAKE, who had to kind of invest some time in making music. He just kind of found music, and then music, you know, became his life, and it became who he was, and then he found how to make a living at producing sound and being a part of a sound design industry. And then kind of putting aside the band and now bringing it back to him because it's calling to him again. We also have John Santana, who started his life as wanting to be a screenwriter. And through that, he made some connections, and that connection then led him to the path he walks now as a comic book producer and publisher. And he's a prolific writer, and he's going to be putting out even more stuff that is not even comic book related. So he's finding his way and kind of settled into who he wants to be. And he's very, very comfortable with that. We also have the amazing Trevor Tillman, who at a young age was looking to be something of a, in the film industry. The film will talk to him very early on. And then he went the route that you're supposed to go, and found that while that led him to a point and a place in his life, it didn't give him the satisfaction that he was looking for, and he embraced just going out and doing it. And when he did that, it was an amazing, amazing experience. And he produced one of my favorite short films of a very long time. And he is out there now challenging himself and pushing himself and finding his footing. So all of those are folks that are kind of becoming comfortable in their own skin. And I think that is an amazing, amazing thing once you live that as an artist. So let's get to talking to them. We have some incredible segments for you. We have, KRISTINA RIENZI's back with another great coaching to keep your, writer life in balance. And we have a great marketing tip from CL Cannon, another great look at a filmmaker from Jin Okubo, and more just important music to write to and to create to by JD Estrada. And we have a incredible short film that we're teasing because it's a very long film. So we're going to throw a little bit of a teaser at you, and then you can go check out the film for yourself, hopefully, in the future. But with that being said, it's time to get on with our show. So let's do that.
These are my lucky charms, and they're just a bunch of different lucky symbols. And I've had this necklace for years. In fact, my author profile, that is 10 years old now, I'm actually wearing these in them. That's how long I've had this. And I usually wear it just to kind of give me that feeling of luck. Anytime I do anything important, I wear it whenever I go to book signings. I wear it whenever I'm doing interviews, or anytime I feel like I need that extra boost of confidence, it's there.
Nice. Do you have a significant, are you willing to share what each significant piece means?
No, they're just generic lucky symbols.
Okay.
It's old, so there's like a lot of gunk on it. I haven't cleaned my jewelry in forever. Yeah, it's like the horseshoe, and there's a locket in here, and there's a lucky stone. There's a 4-leaf clover. So it's just generic lucky symbols, and I've had it for forever. I think my mom gave it to me years and years ago. I don't even know where she got it from.
Is there a certain piece on there that is more special to you than others, or that is your favorite?
I don't have it on now. There's another charm I attached to it. That's my jade, and my jade is definitely my lucky stone. Nice. And I usually have that one on when I really need to feel confident.
Tell everybody about the next book coming out, because I know you just have a new release here. So tell everybody a little bit about your book.
Yes, actually, I have them with me.
Nice.
I haven't even done the reveal on Facebook yet, but this is the brand new one that is coming out on Tuesday. And that's book 1 right here. These are the Agents of Asset series. And I don't have a planned number of books I'm going to put in the series, but I'm going to write it until it's done. We're up to book 3 now, which is what I'm currently working on. And Sage has just learned that she is part of a magical lineage. She belongs to the Asset Agency, which is the Anonymous Supernatural Security and Elimination Task Force, which are tasked with protecting magic and protecting humans from learning about magic and all the dangers. So that's what this series is about. Book 1 is her origin story, and book 2 is her very first assignment, which I can't give details on.
So tell everybody how this journey began for you. Why did you choose to write books? What was it about writing that just came to you, and why did you go this route?
You know, I've always liked to tell stories. Like from the very beginning, I like to entertain people, but writing didn't really happen as fluidly. When I was a kid, I would make up skits and I would make up plays and get all the cousins together and we would do stuff to entertain people. Writing for like long form, like actual story form, took a lot to build up to. And then when I did, the first story I wrote ended up getting basically deleted.
Oh.
So I worked on it, and we'd moved from Texas to Nevada when I was about 14. And during that move, we actually had floppy disks. They were floppy back then. And they broke in transit. And all the stuff that I had written, it was destroyed. And I didn't want to pick up a pen again for a long time after that, or pick up a pen, type on a computer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a good long while before I was ready to like sit down and actually devote the time to writing, because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of focus and a determination to sit down and write from beginning to end. I mean, everybody wants to write. Everybody says, oh, I've got a great story idea. And they might sit down and type a few things out, but a lot of people give up quickly because it takes a lot of effort. So it wasn't until I want to say 2004, right after my first daughter was born, that I started feeling like, you know what, I can do this. I can sit down, I can type stuff out. And I went chapter by chapter by chapter until I had a full story written. And it was like the light switch turned on, and I just wanted to keep doing it. And the more I wrote, the more I wanted to write.
Nice. And the more you did write.
I look back now and I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of words. And it's funny because every time I finish a series, or sometimes just even finishing a book, there's that moment of, oh no, what am I going to write next? Will I ever come up with the next great idea? And I always do come up with something later, but there's always that moment of, what if this was the last thing I've ever written?
Did you always have it designed from the beginning that you were going to do series, or was it just a happenstance that became part of how you write?
The first book I wrote, I hadn't intended it to be a series. I was just proud of actually finishing something. It kind of became just a natural thing. I like to read books in series. I like to invest in a world and spend a lot of time getting to know the characters. So the bigger the series for me as a reader, the better. And I think readers are kind of like that. Once they get to know somebody, they really want to learn everything they can. Yeah. And so once I finished the first book, then it was like, well, what happens next? And what happens next? And what happens to this character and that character? And then you end up in this whole world where you've really spent a lot of time developing all of the characters, and they've each kind of turned into their own series, and it just gets wider and wider.
What is your favorite part of the world building process? Do you have an aspect that you really enjoy creating?
The world building is the fun part. It's following the rules afterwards. That's the hard part. I really enjoy the whole, creating new types of characters or throwing your own twist onto something that is pretty familiar to most readers and making it your own. But then once you have it established, if you make a mistake, readers are going to know. They're savvy. So you really have to go back and focus on, okay, this has to be this way because you wrote it this way. This is in the rule book. You can't do this now. And so I found the second book in my asset series was so much harder to write because I had ideas that were just right up here. And the rules had to take it down a step to make it believable within that world. So I constantly had to go back and fix things.
What type of writer are you? Are you a pantser, plotter? Has it changed over time? Because you've written a lot, so I'm wondering if your process has changed. I'm sure by now it's pretty streamlined.
It's funny. It does change. I still consider myself mostly a pantser because I don't like to write myself into a corner. And when I started, I was 100% pantser. I would just write and just see where it took me. And if it took me somewhere bad, scrap that chapter, write something new. Now I do what I call like to-do lists. I'm not a hard outliner. I don't like to force myself to, go from point A to point B to point C in that order, even though I do write very linearly. What I do is make checklists now. My character should do this, 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 and this before they get to the end. And I try and hit those points as naturally as possible.
Nice.
In fact, I'm working on book 3 in the the Agents of Assets series. And I spent all night last night trying to come up with that checklist of what I need to do. And it took me on a side quest into learning about D&D and the different character quests and magical artifacts. I went down the rabbit hole with it last night.
As it often happens like that, right?
Yeah, never ever look at an author's search history. It's just completely weird.
Did you learn something specific that has helped you now navigate the world of publishing and authoring that you didn't know when you first started?
You know, it's an ever-evolving system, and you will constantly learn new things. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the business, there's always something new to learn. And a lot of times, it's the feedback from readers that really helps me push forward. They
Nice.
tell me what they like, what they didn't like, what worked for them, areas that I could definitely improve on as far as the world building and the character, depth. I've got one beta reader who I absolutely love. When I send her stuff to read, she is brutally honest. She compliments, obviously, but she tells me this doesn't work and this is why. And it forces me to go back and take a harder look at what I'm doing to make sure that it makes sense.
Do you find that there's different fans for the different types that you've accomplished over time, or do you think that the fans have been pretty good about sticking with you from beginning and going into the evolution of your own authoring evolution?
I definitely think the fans that have been there for the longest, they like all of what I've written. I do have some that desperately want me to go back and revisit the stories that have more of the romantic elements in them. And I will. I do always listen to my readers, so I will go back and work on those. But a lot of the newer fans I've picked up seem to really enjoy the stories that, yeah, it has a little touch of romance. There might be some hints of love interest, but it's not the focal point of the story. They really like the action, the suspense, the mystery, and then just the giant twist at the end that I always try and throw in.
How much of it is about finding a voice? How much do you feel like that has been the idea behind it, right? I mean, is that what has kind of given people the opportunity to follow you all the way through, you feel?
Yeah, I do think so. And once you find your personal voice as an author, it makes the writing come that much easier.
Mm.
As a new author, you're constantly struggling with the imposter syndrome of trying to live up to another author's level or style of writing. And once you figure out that there's a bunch of different styles, they're all acceptable, and you can work comfortably within your own skin, I think that the words flow easier, the story flows more naturally, and readers appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I've had a lot of readers tell me that they followed me from the beginning and they're like, I love where you've gone. You've grown so much since the original stories. Even though I love those, I'm really enjoying what you're doing now.
What's your favorite thing about hosting a show about writers for writers? What do you think you've gotten out of it that you didn't expect to get out of it?
It goes back to the whole building connections. The indie community is stronger because of our connections. A lot of people in the indie community are very good about sharing knowledge, about helping people, pointing people in the right directions when they have questions. And I've found that pretty much everybody we've ever brought on the show has been absolutely wonderful. And they bring that new perspective and they make that new connection. It's somebody I can call back later, whether or not I want to, bring them back on the show for something, touch base with them, see how they're doing, share or swap about new releases. It's really, it feels like we've built our own community almost through Spilling Ink. We've got so many authors that we've brought in and met and are now friends with.
You're an avid attender of conferences, festivals, book cons. You sell at book cons. Give us a sense of something that you learned about book cons that you were never told, but you've discovered over time that has helped you become successful.
You really have to step out of your own skin. You have to be on when you're at an event, whether you're presenting or whether you're there to just meet and greet and talk to people. When I'm selling it at booths, it's not necessarily about me selling the book while I'm there. I'm selling myself as the author. And a lot of times that means talking to readers about what they like rather than shoving my book in their face,
Nice.
Making that personal connection, because that's what builds a fan. Just shoving a book in somebody's face, yes or no, they may be interested, we'll see. But if you make that personal connection, they may not buy the book today, but they may look you up later. They may follow you on social media and slowly develop that relationship with you that leads them to be one of those fans that follows everything that you do, because you're more than just the name on a book. You're an actual person to them.
I want to ask you what you love about being indie.
It's the freedom. I do like being able to control my world, so to speak. I can, I can decide when the books come out. I have full approval on covers, editing, interior. I can make this book something I'm very proud of without having other people tell me what to do. Now, that's not to say that I don't take advice. My editor constantly tries to teach me how to write. Bless her. Every time I send her a manuscript, she's like, didn't we talk about this the last time? When I talk with cover artists, especially when I'm hiring a cover artist, I'm the project manager at this point. Yeah. I'm not making the art, but I'm overseeing what the art's going to look like, working with them and hearing their input and giving my input. It's a really fun experience, and it's really worthwhile to do, because at the end of the day, you want to be proud of what you put out there. You want readers to love what you put out there. And after all that hard work and you see the reviews coming in, it's overwhelming sometimes how proud you can feel that you did such a good job.
Hello everyone, this is OKUBO for GoIndieNow film review, and the film we're doing today is called Pulse. It's a neo-noir. It's starring David Banks and written and directed by Ryan J. Thompson. With this film, it's a very short film. It's a film reminiscent of the classics. It has elements from the Maltese Falcon. It's got that dark, ebbing feel to it. I'm not saying it's black and white. I'm not saying you're going to find Humphrey Bogart in it. But I'm saying that you're going to feel the callback to the classics with this film. And the darkness of the lead soul shine through. Basically, when you see his face, when you see the way the film is shot, you're going to get that dark feel of his emotional state. And it is a short film. But, length doesn't matter with film. As long as you get the story that you want to display, as long as you show what you're trying to do, then you're going to really, really enjoy this film. Have a quick look right now. So, there you go. I know it's just a short preview because the film is so short, I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. So it's a very short preview there of the film. And in my opinion, this film is a must-see. And you should be able to get a complete story feel of it, just by what the writer provided and what the director provided himself in how he shot this film, and you really get a feel for it. And
Sorry.
It's a bloody mess and a bloody wreck.
I'm putting even more in now.
I won't do it, I promise.
That's a cut.
Peace.
I know pulse is seen in many different ways as a way to signify something, right? Have a pulse on the fashion world, have a pulse on life, right? And this one is just having a pulse, being alive. It's what life is, right? Right. I hope you guys all enjoy it. This is Gino Kubo at GoIndieNow. Take care.
Talk about how you started in this business. What brought you to filmmaking? How did you learn to love it?
When I was at a very impressionable age, I feel like there was a great confluence of different content that I was exposed to. So, for example, one of the first films that I ever watched was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'm 30, and that film came out 30 years ago. And I think that when I analyze it as an adult, I think between that and later when I was closer to 5 or 6 years old, Jurassic Park coming out, those are both movies that kind of exposed the dimension of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. Roger Rabbit very overtly with seeing the seams, seeing the film set around the cartoon and all of that, the sort of fantasy version of movie making. And then Jurassic Park, it was a lot of the just a lot of the hype surrounding that whole experience. So I grew up in Seattle. Maybe the year after the film was released, there was a exhibit at the Seattle Science Center that was equal parts paleontology and filmmaking. So there were props from the film, lots of clips behind the scenes. I remember seeing Spielberg direct the actors, documentary footage of it, of course. So there's that, and then I remember that same year, there's like a television special with James Earl Jones called The Making of Jurassic Park. And all of this, for someone 6 years old, I think that sort of unconsciously lured me in towards filmmaking. Got serious about it in high school, worked with broadcasting for a while, really leaned in heavily into filmmaking and wanted to go to film school by the time I was a senior. That brought me to San Francisco, where I went to the Academy of Art University to study directing, and I mean that was also a very fertile time in terms of just being exposed to different tastes, having my tastes challenged, having my work challenged, and also being around just artists of every kind. That's the other thing, that as I've gotten older, what draws me to filmmaking is less the spectacle or the entertainment aspect of it, and it's more this sort of epiphany that it is all the arts, that cinema encapsulates everything in a way, that it is painting, it is writing, it is theater, it is acting, it's photography, it's music, it's all of those things. And so I feel like I can't think of a more rewarding pursuit, because again, everything I absorb, whether it's reading a novel or going to an art museum or sketching something, it all feeds back into filmmaking for me.
Very cool. Now, I mean, your film it's complex in the way it was shot, and it's not the way you describe it, but it's very interesting how well it translates on the screen like that. So talk a little bit about your pre-production process in that respect, and how much prep did you do to get that film looking that way?
I would say Beacon was sort of an experiment in a way of how precise can we be prior to actually doing the shoot.
Nice.
A lot of it was driven by logistics. Shooting in Death Valley, we didn't really have the luxury of being able to go back, or just, it's not, it's a 9-hour drive. Yeah. And with a crew, logistically we had one shot at going there, getting what we need in a couple days, and then heading back to San Francisco. So pre-production seemed like the best recourse to deal with that, so that we're not winging anything. Let me just say, I feel like there's two different kinds of filmmakers, and I love them both, but there's the hunter and then there's the gatherer. So the hunter, I would say, you're starting from, you've whittled down, you've essentially done your editing and pre-production.
Sure. So
you've drawn every shot, you've decided what your palette is, you've really meticulously planned everything, and then when you get to production, it's really about just hunting for those exact components. Then there's gatherers, which it's about getting a lot of content, getting a lot of takes, maybe doing some improvisation with the actors, and really leaving no idea unexplored during production, and then finding the best film out of the edit and carving it from that. Beacon was part of it was just a desire to emulate filmmakers that I love, like De Palma and of course Hitchcock, and
a little Kubrick in there.
Kubrick, of course. Kubrick in a lot of ways just trying to aspire to his level of ambiguity and letting the film talk, and as opposed to being very explicit with things. I'm a big fan. I know he gets kind of dragged through the mud, but I'm a big fan of M. Night for the same reason, being kind of a formalist filmmaker who uses genre as sort of the broad stroke behind something maybe a little more personal, or perhaps even a little more abstract. So, and I'm currently working on a film and the idea was to do the exact opposite process. Let's try winging it to some degree. Let's try improving. Let's come up with scenarios that aren't in the script and film it. And I have to say, I miss doing it the way, the hunter way, because to me it's so less anxiety inducing. And now I'm faced with a project where the edit is so intimidating.
Yeah.
Whereas it was the opposite problem with Beacon. Beacon, sometimes the challenge in the edit was not enough takes, or maybe not having no coverage. You really had to figure out how to make this work. It works in a storyboard form, but now that there's motion, that was the challenge. Is how do we keep it fluid? And in some cases, we made it very elliptical, so it's kind of jumpy, but we sort of embraced that as the style after a while, and we really accentuated those jumps with sound effects and all sorts of things. But a lot of that was just born out of being so beholden to the storyboards that at times you might one of the big learnings was always get a clean entrance and get a clean exit to every shot.
I love to ask this question of filmmakers, because so often when we see it on the big screen, and I was there when you saw it on the big screen, we're so critical of ourselves. We see the little imperfections. We see the thing, I should have tightened that or cut there. But I don't want to know that from you. What I want to know from you is, what do you think you nailed?
Ooh, that's a great question. Honestly, and I have to give all credit to all the individual contributors on the film. But the elements that really I keep going back to, that I'll watch the film for, are the sound design and the score. There's a lot I love about. I mean, not to gush over my own film because there's plenty I'm critical over, but like there's certain things that
It's okay. I asked you to,
Yeah.
so you're fine.
There's also things where if you look at some of the pre-production artwork, some of the concept art and the stuff that the production designer, and we all discussed what we wanted it to look like. We talked about the interiors being very chiaroscuro and kind of we're looking at Caravaggio. I'm really proud about how that stuff turned out. But yeah, the sound design is beyond what I even knew I could ask for.
And it's really gorgeous in this film too, because it enhances the visuals absolutely 100%. What did working with just one actor teach you that you're now applying to the film you're doing now?
That's a really good question.
Because in this film you only have, in Beacon you only have one actor.
Yeah, there's one actress who kind of appears in a dream sequence, but really, yeah, it's one character for the most part. And working with him, it was interesting. Working with one actor, he becomes so part of the process. There's so much of a shorthand that we had built up, communicating to each other because he was, it was written with him in mind. I knew him personally, knew he was a good actor, and knew that he was itching to do something like this. So the shorthand, and also just feeling like that he was a true collaborator. In many ways, another author on the film. With Strays, working with more of an ensemble, with people that I auditioned for the roles, it is a little bit more of feeling like the coach. Sometimes it is about communicating more in the moment, and really, I know on Strays, on a day-to-day basis, if there were problems, either something about a character wasn't coming through the performance, it would end up having to be a discussion on set that day, whereas with Scott, it was through osmosis or whatever, we were pretty much on the same page at any given second. And oftentimes, he did stuff that would be totally appropriate, totally in sync with what the story is, and that I didn't ask him to do, wasn't expecting, that delighted me. There's a moment that I think of that's in the final film where his plants are dying. It's the slow realization that he could either stay at a ship and slowly die, or he can go out and see what this thing is and go on essentially a suicide trek. And Scott did this thing where he picks up a potted plant, looks at it, and just throws it. I remember it kind of startled me on set, but that's in the film, and it's a great just moment of emotion because throughout that performance, he's very internal and very somber.
So, what do you love about being indie?
So the value of being indie, I think, is just, again, being able to author your own content. You're not pulling cables on someone else's film. You're making your own stuff. The challenge is obviously getting people, surrounding yourself with people that will work for cheap or that really believe in the idea, or and also who will be honest with you when either it's not working or whatever. You don't necessarily have that built-in infrastructure that you have in the industry if you're on a union shoot or whatever. There's it's a lot more gypsy-like.
What would you say to a young filmmaker who approaches you? What do you think technically, or maybe not even technically, maybe it's the big picture of things, would you recommend to them that they learn and really nail before they get into a production?
I think recognizing where you're deficient in terms of technical knowledge, don't let that stop you. In some ways, those deficiencies are going to be your strengths if you really lean into those. But also surround yourself with people that are like better than you. I think that's true for anyone. I think if you are surrounded with, like, for example, the production designer, no one I know other than him could draw and paint the way he did, and not only did it make the film better to have him on board, but it feeds your energy, and it kind of elevates your skill set. You become better. Same thing with the photography aspect. Get a DP that you trust, whose taste you like. I think anyone who's a DP, if they have that title, hopefully they know a camera. So then it really becomes about, hey, let me see your work, and finding the person whose taste is most aligned with you, not just who's competent. If you're lucky enough. And I also think dare to fail. If you feel like you're technically deficient in an area, maybe, I mean, that's how I felt with Strays. It proved to me that I'm still kind of deficient in that area. But the idea with the follow-up was to kind of, well, I'm going to make a film that really leans heavily on those things I feel that I'm not good at, dialogue or, you know, whatever it is. I think that's a good boot camp.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
you'll come out of it minted a little bit, and you'll be better at whatever it is.
Hello, GoIndieNow creatives. I am KRISTINA, RIENZI, thriller author and coach, here to talk to you today about the roller coaster of author life. This is a topic I could talk about for hours, but I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to try and fit everything in that I think will be helpful in terms of gaining the right mindset and perspective to successfully thrive in the roller coaster of author life. Just like in life, there are ups and downs, and just like in your story, right? There are times where there's worry and fear, and then there are times where there is some exhilaration and euphoria going on as well. This happens on a roller coaster, this happens in life, this happens in our story, but really in author life, it's important that we gain perspective on it, and we also get the right mindset so that we can deal with it. So we're in this for the long haul, right? Creatives, we're here to stay. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some of the ups in author life are pretty simple to identify, right? It's when you get a positive review, you get an acceptance of some kind, whether it's your story gets published in a magazine, whether you get an agent, you get a publisher. That also, if we have a contest win, sale, a ranking, you get some great feedback from your editor, beta readers love your story. When something happens that you want to happen, it's an up. So we can really appreciate that and we get excited about. My personal favorite is when I'm writing and I'm in the flow, I'm in the zone, and I'm really loving the story. And of course, the ultimate up for me is the end, typing the end. Downs could be things like lack of sales, maybe a rejection letter, a rejection of an opportunity, getting some feedback from your editor or beta readers that isn't great. Could also be something like a distraction, possibly writer's block, blank page, or what we'll talk about next month is comparisonitis. So comparing yourself to someone else's success. That could be a down, if you could look at it that way. And a lot of these things are, again, perspective and mindset, right? So if there are too many ups, and that sounds like that could be, it couldn't be a bad thing, right? But if we're always positive about every single thing that happens and we're not looking for opportunities to grow and improve, we might not be paying attention, right? We may have an overinflated sense of self, sense of our work, and not allowing ourselves room to grow and improve. And quite honestly, at every level, there's room for improvement and growth. Even at Stephen King's level, he'd probably tell you that too. There's always opportunity to change and grow and get better. So if we're just feeling great about everything, I mean, that's not a bad thing, but there are opportunities to learn. We do have to pay attention to those downs, which is what I'm going to get into now. So on the flip side of it, too many downs, it's not fun anymore. Writing becomes a chore, it becomes a job, it becomes stress, and that's not what this is about. Creativity is about finding that inner peace, that inner euphoria. We all love to express ourselves. That's why we're writers. And so if it isn't fun, what are we doing? Why are we here? If we've lost our passion. And I think that's part of it. When there's a down, we want to ask ourselves, why are we writing? What am I looking for to get out of, what am I looking to get out of this? Maybe I want to ask you, is this still for me? Do I still want to be in the game here? Or maybe you're just putting too much of yourself into the writing world and not balancing with other things in your life that are so important. In terms of the ups and the uptime, right? We are productive, we're having fun, we are dreaming, we're believing in the impossible, we're confident, we're positive, we're driven, we're resilient, and all those great things are happening to us. And we can't forget to celebrate those wins. Really important when we're in the up, celebrate it. Oftentimes we look and go, oh, great review, and move on with our lives. Like, no, celebrate that. These are really important. There's not a lot of wins for us. I'm not going to say that we don't all get them, but my point is with the win comes sometimes a a loss, it's really important that we celebrate it. We get excited about it because that's what's going to strengthen us and prepare us for when the down comes. And there, you know, in like anything in life, when there's an up, there's a down, and we want to be prepared for it. We want to be strong for it. So in the downtime where we struggle, we are doubting ourselves. Our inner critic is really prevalent then. That's something we have to pay attention to. How are we talking to ourselves? What negative things are we saying? And are they true? Are they just, you know, a way for us to not do the work, to procrastinate, to beat ourselves up because it's easier, instead of just really questioning what it is we could do to improve? How could we make this an opportunity? And I'm not trying to say like don't acknowledge the down, because yeah, there are real downs. There's rejections, there's negative reviews, there's things that happen that hurt us, and as they should, because that means it means something to us, our writing, right? We want it to mean something. We want to feel something about it. But I think where we find the opportunity is in being realistic and recognizing, is this a real down? Is it something I need to pay attention to and do something about, or is this just something I got to brush off and move on from? And you'll know if that's a big thing or not. You'll know. And trust your gut on that. And in the down times, these are opportunities for us to question, as we get real clear about what's important to us and what isn't, what we want and what we don't want when things are going badly. Like, do we really want to be a writer? Like, what do we want? And we just get really clear about it, and then we can say, you know, yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm not going to let this rejection get me down. This, you know, 1-star review get me down. It is important that I stay focused, that I persevere, and this is a time for you to be determined and sort of concentrate on what you can do to keep going and to better yourself. The positive part is when there's a down, there's nowhere to go but up. So you're going to come back up. It's going to happen again. So I try to think like in terms of the story, right? So we all know how story works and what our hero goes through, the obstacles they go through, what they have to overcome, how we make it really hard for them, right? To have a success, to get to the end of their story and to triumph. This is what we're going through. And if we look at ourselves as our hero and we think about what would our hero do? What would we want our character to do? Would we want our character to wallow in sorrow and not pick that, you know, laptop back up and get back to work? If our hero doesn't do that, they're not going to reach the end of the story. They're not going to grow and change and develop, right? So if we think like our hero, we will, you know, recognize what the issues are. We will appreciate the down for what it is. It can either be a way to strengthen us and to give us something to learn and grow from, or it can be kind of a challenge. Like, hey, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to keep going? Or are you going to give up? And if we look at the down as a trainer, as sort of a challenge, questioning our, you know, who we are and what we want from writing, we can look at it as an opportunity to fight back and to overcome that obstacle, be it a bad review or a rejection or just a day where the writing isn't coming to you. You have writer's block, the blank page is staring at you, you're frustrated, or you're just not into it. You're just not into it. So that's okay too. No, you're not alone. Every single author that's ever been successful in any way, shape, or form, and especially the big guys, they've been rejected 1,000,000 times over. The only difference is they got back up and kept going, and they never stopped. And I think that's the key. It's like you deal with it, it's happening, you feel it, you recognize that you're upset, you're angry, you're frustrated, but you let that be, and then you move on. Be it that day, the next day, the following week, take the time you need, but do keep going, because that's the difference between being successful at this and not. Most people aren't successful because they give up. If you keep going, you have a greater chance of being successful in the way that you define success, whatever that may be. Know also that no matter what happens in life, and especially in this writing life, change is a constant. Nothing will ever stay the same. You will change, the world around you will change, your ideas will change, readers will change, Amazon will change, all our platforms will change, publishers will change. It's constantly changing, and these days it's changing at the blink of an eye. So know that it's expected, things will change, and that is stressful sometimes and frustrating. It can also be exciting, because with change comes opportunity, right? And you be prepared for that. Know that so long as you stay steadfast and don't give up on your dream, you will will get to your goal, whatever your goal is. And again, it might not be overnight. Most success isn't. Most success is like the 20-year success, not the overnight success, because you're hanging in there and you're going through it and you're growing and changing with the obstacles, which there will be obstacles, and they're normal and they are for everybody, even the big guys. So don't think it, maybe because you aren't where you want to be in this writing life yet, that these obstacles are the end game for you. They're not the end game. They're a stepping stone along the way. You step over them, you keep moving, and you do not look back, right? And also, really important, expect success. Put it out in the universe. Speak it, say it, and you will know that once you've overcome them, when that success comes, you will celebrate it. You will reward yourself, because that is a reward for overcoming your obstacle. Now, this is a mindset. This is a state of mind, a way of being. It's not, you can't control everything that's going to happen in life, right? But you can absolutely control how you react to it. No one is saying you can't be upset, you can't be angry, you can't be frustrated. That is normal, and you should be all those things when these things happen to you. Being positive all the time isn't realistic, but just know when something doesn't go your way, something will go your way. The next thing will go your way. So I hope that helped. I hope it inspired you. I hope that you can take some of these little tidbits and just really get them ingrained in your brain and start changing your mindset, because I'm with you, and I get frustrated and stressed out like the rest of us, and I want to give up and burn my manuscripts and never write again. But I remind myself that, you know what, there's a better thing coming. And I'm in this for a reason. I'm writing stories for a reason, and it brings me joy. And that's what life is all about, those moments that bring you joy. So do what you love, do it to the best of your ability, do it with all of your heart, and just stay positive, because this is your dream and you have to chase it. Do not give up.
Hey guys, Seal Kitten here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another marketing tip. This month, I want to tell you about something that's actually pretty basic, but I keep seeing it happening over and over and over again, and it's one of the mistakes that people seem to just keep making, and I want to make sure that you don't make this mistake. So here it is. Anytime that you are promoting your book, of course you want to have something visual. You want to have a video, you want to have a nice graphic, but you also want to always make sure that you include the link to your book. I saw a gorgeous, gorgeous cover the other day on Twitter, and I was like, oh my God, I have to have this. And you know what? They didn't have the link anywhere. They didn't have the link on their profile, nowhere. I had to actually go to Amazon and hunt that book down by the name, and by looking at the cover and the author and making sure it's the right book. But do you know how many people will actually do that? Unless it's a book that they absolutely adore, they're just going to scroll on. So always, always, please make sure that you have the link to your book. Even if it's, you don't have to have every link. If you are on a wide platform, just put Amazon. That's where most people buy anyways. If you don't have, let's say you're on Twitter or on Instagram and you don't have much room to put your link, just put at least the Amazon link everywhere. Everywhere that you promote your book, you need to have the link, because not everybody is going to go hunt it down. I would say maybe 1 out of 10 people will actually go hunt your book down. So think about all the sales that you're missing. Even if you have great graphics, even if you have great marketing wording, and even if your book is, just an awesome book, there's only a certain percentage of people who are actually going to go hunt that book down. So the smart thing to do is to put your link everywhere. Everywhere that you promote, put your book link. Okay, well, that's my tip for this month. Like I said, it's pretty basic, but it is really important. I've seen a lot of people on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram neglecting to put their link. And I know on Instagram you can't put a link in your description and have it be a live link, but especially if you're using something like, if not that, then later, like I do, which is a program that will retweet your Instagram to Twitter with the picture, which makes it a lot nicer. You can still include the link in there, and when it posts on Twitter, they'll actually have a live link. So you always want to be conscious of that also. Anyway, that's my tip. Always have your link with your book when you're promoting it, please, because you never know how many sales that you're losing out on just because you didn't have that link there. Because I hate to say it, but people are lazy. I'm lazy. If I wouldn't have really liked that cover, I would have scrolled on. But I did end up, hunting it down. But like I said, I really love the cover. If they didn't have that amazing cover, I know I would have scrolled on by it. Anyway, I don't want to make this video hugely long, but again, link with your book, always.
I see myself in your eyes. Won't hold your gaze too long. Blinded by smiles and praises. What have I sacrificed? So
So tell me how your journey began as a musician, and then how you created the band.
Well, yeah, sure. I've been playing music for as long as I can remember. I've been in, especially singing and just tinkering. No real formal training, but I did get a guitar when I was 15, and really never put it down from the time I was 15 to 18.
Is the name based on the Margaret Atwood book?
That's correct. Yeah. The original idea was that it was going to be a very literal take on ORYX and CRAKE. The plan was I was going to be playing computers and synthesizers, and she was going to be playing a harp. It's actually a harpsichord, kind of a miniature harp, and the two of us were going to be ORYX and CRAKE. Me handling the more electronic synthetic elements, and her handling the more organic elements. But it grew. That never actually happened, not even once. We started writing songs and realized that a bigger arrangement was a good idea, and ran into some people that we loved playing with, especially Matt Gerard, a cello player that I've been playing with for over 10 years now.
Nice. What do you think about the process of creating an album? Do you prefer that over doing a live performance, or is it always live performance beforehand?
I believe in the album. It's tough in the world of singles, but I grew up with albums. It is a pretty perfect art form, or it can be. I love the album. I hate seeing. One of my biggest gripes with music right now is the priority of the single over the album. So whenever I can muster the strength and the fortitude to actually make an album, I will do it. I really believe in that as an art form.
What have you learned from the process that has helped you as a person?
Going about deciding you're going to make an album and actually seeing it through to the end is a gargantuan task, and I think doing it, it's certainly there's a lot of pride there if you can make something that you believed in, and that that's good. Only you can determine that, but I think it takes a lot. It takes a lot to make it happen.
Yeah. Especially for a band like yours that has kind of an orchestra feel to it, right? I mean, there's several elements. I mean, just incorporating a cello alone is different from most organized bands that are just guitar, drums, and bass.
Yeah, there's some truth in that. We really set out when we first started. I really wanted to make something that wasn't just a regular band, just guitar, bass, and drums. We really set out to incorporate things that aren't often incorporated into a rock band, and it seems like since we did that, it's become even more common. And we started back in 2010, and it's not like it was a unheard of, but we definitely. The idea of a lead guitar driven band and vocalist that never really appealed to us, or especially not me. I'd rather do something a little different.
Since you're a sound designer by trade, what do you think is the most overlooked aspect of sound design? What do you think bands miss a lot of times with their sound design? And also, what do videos and movies and things tend to miss that you notice right away?
Sound design wise, I wish more bands would take some chances and get a little weird. We've heard everything before. I think creative sound design and manipulation is a good way to kind of break out of whatever mold a band finds itself in, whether it's folk, hip hop, it doesn't matter. You can always manipulate it, make it something new. Yeah, and I do think sound design can be a big part of that. can, a new sound or a manipulated sound that no one has ever heard before suddenly makes an old genre new again.
I noticed a lot of times in your music, especially, there's a lot of foleying going on where there's like background that you've added aesthetics like screaming and things like that in the background. Is that something that sound design misses a lot of too? Is that organic kind of idea that has a little bit of that to kind of, do you think that enhances a piece?
Sure. I think well done sound designs can really enhance an album. It has to be a certain kind of album, of course. So many of my favorite albums are conceptual albums, like in the vein of like a Dark Side of the Moon, and definitely without the sound effects, they wouldn't be the same album. It's vital to that album, right? The clocks and the of course the amazing synthesizer sounds as well. But it all sets that tone and makes it something bigger than just a collection of songs.
Is that how you approached your albums? Was like doing it conceptually? Did you always feel like you had to have a concept going into it, or did you just put music together and then try and build the concept around it?
The last album, the second album we did, Marriage, was definitely a concept album. It was based around the ideas of a commitment to not just a marriage, but a commitment to anything that you find yourself committed to or married to. There's lots of sound design elements that might not even be noticeable that kind of, at least like they were designed to kind of set a stage. We even have we recorded all kinds of things around. We recorded the whole album here at this house, besides some of the drums. But we recorded all kinds of household appliances. We recorded the washing machine and dishwasher and even some of the like faucet drips and stuff like that. And those kinds of things, those kind of sounds manipulated, find themselves throughout the album in different ways.
What do you really love about being the indie spirit? What do you cherish about being an independent artist?
One of the major advantages, let me preface this by saying I would absolutely love to have a gigantic, major label budget to make an album. How I can't imagine actually having money to spend and get a full orchestra on board for a session or anything like that. That would be amazing, and hired Nigel Godrich to produce it. That would be phenomenal. But being an indie band, one of the greatest things is about being an indie. You don't have to answer to anybody, and you don't really have any deadlines that you don't set yourself. So you have all the time in the world to make something that you're proud of, that you think is good.
What does writing sound like? If you ask any writer of any caliber, good, bad, mediocre, fantastic, world-renowned, or an indie starting out, odds are they're gonna have a different answer. And I think it's just that as we live and experience things, the playlist keeps growing. It depends on what we're tapping into when we're writing. In that endless playlist, ZOEY Keating is definitely on there for me. What do you get when you get an insanely talented cellist with a loop pedal? You get an unstoppable musical force. that layer after layer after layer of beautifully melodic music. It just wraps you in warmth. Zoe Keating, I've listened to 3 of her albums. She has a new one out. The ones that I have heard with a lot of detail are One Cello times 16 Atoma, which is this track, and this track is actually called Sun With Sets. And the other album I've heard a lot, I've listened to a lot, is called Into the Trees, and this song is called Escape Artist. And just hear how it builds up, because it's gonna start looping. And to me, the cello is a really interesting instrument that has a lot of depth to it. It has a lot of bite to it, and even though it's a classical instrument, I think it's one of the most heavy metal instruments of classical music. You can get some really chunky, hard, deep chords. And it can go pretty high, not as much as a violin, but enough for you to feel such a range of emotion. Because it, in terms of tonality, there's a lot going for this instrument, and Zoe Keating really loves to play with what you can do with a cello. Like many indie artists, I discovered Zoe Keating years back on Bandcamp, and we've gotten along splendidly for quite a while. I think it's good music to write high fantasy, or maybe like a scene that takes place at sea is something that actually went with me. And I actually used it, some of her other tracks, in battle scenes, because I think it has that oomph. And she's an independent artist. She's been doing this for a while. You look at her and you see how she expresses herself. She's really subdued and mellow, but her music is really intense, and when she's playing, she's completely focused. Other cellists that I have listened to, they get lost with the instrument and swaying. With her, it's almost like she's going to battle, and you can see her attacking the notes deliberately, and it's a really interesting experience to have sonically. There are so many good things to say about her, but I think one of the best compliments that I can give to this is that, you can put the entire album on repeat all and just keep writing. And again, for one person to achieve such depth with one instrument, and to show that something classical can benefit from technology, I think that gives pretty much anyone a couple of ideas. So check her out, Zoe Keating, on Bandcamp. Support indie, because it's always time to go indie now.
Hello, my name is Bruce Olav Solheim. I have been writing since I was 4 years old, so I'm now almost 60. So for many, many years, 56 years, I've been writing. I've written 8 books and 10 plays, and today I'm going to be talking about my latest book, Timeless, a paranormal personal history. And I also teach a paranormal class, or will start teaching a paranormal class this fall at Citrus College in Glendora, California. My parents were from Norway. I'm first generation American, and the first person in my family to go to college. I also served 6 years in the Army. That's just a little bit about me. This book was illustrated by my friend Gary Dumm, who's famous for illustrating the American Splendor series with Harvey Pekar, if you're familiar with that. Anyway, I would like to thank Joe Compton for letting me talk about my book here today. I'm going to read a story called Deception Pass. Now, these are all part of things that have actually happened to me. So this is a paranormal memoir. Another one of my earliest memories was of an incident that happened in 1965 on a family camping trip to a place called Deception Pass State Park in Washington State, when I was nearly 7 years old. There are two ways to get to Deception Pass. One way is to take the ferry to the south end of Whidbey Island and then drive to the north end to arrive at Deception Pass. The other way was to drive up Interstate 5 to Burlington and then go west towards Anacortes and drive onto Whidbey Island via two bridges from Fidalgo Island to Pass Island, which is in the middle, and then finally to Whidbey Island. The two bridge spans aren't very long. One is 500 feet, the other is 1,000 feet. The drop to the dangerous waters below is nearly 200 feet. The waters at Deception Pass at tide change are so turbulent because it is a narrow, deep channel that connects the Strait of Juan de Fuca with the Saratoga Passage. More than 500 people have committed suicide at Deception Pass since the 1930s by jumping off the bridge spans. Maybe that's why the bridge always gave me a rather eerie feeling. We would stop at Pass Island, where there would be a small parking lot, and we would get out and look around and marvel at the great height and rugged beauty of this unique Pacific Northwest location. There were plenty of trails on Pass Island, and none of them were supervised or had any protective safety fencing or guardrails in 1965. It was very treacherous, with a lot of sharp rocks below the steep high cliffs on the north side of Pass Island, called Canoe Pass. One summer day, I remember running around like crazy, like I usually did when I was a kid, with my parents not knowing where I was half the time. As I was running with careless abandon down a trail on the north side of Pass Island, I didn't notice that the path ended abruptly at the edge of the cliff. The cliff plunged down nearly vertical with sharp rocks at the bottom, 200 feet below, in the raging, turbulent seawater running through the narrow channel. I have two memories of what happened next. In one memory, I plunged to my certain death alone and immediately knew what a terrible mistake I had made. Oddly, I don't remember hitting the rocks below or the blackness, just blackness. In another memory, I ran off the cliff and again knew I was doomed, but then time stood still as I floated in the air momentarily. I felt an intense warmth and bright light hovering near me and holding me. The next thing I knew, I was back on the trail as if nothing had happened. My dad had me by the shoulders. He was furious and yelling at me. My mom came after and was crying. Had I fallen from the cliff and died, or had some mysterious force or entity stopped the tragedy and safely lifted me back onto the trail? Obviously, I'm writing these words, so I must have lived, yet I have this haunting feeling that something else happened as well. My parents were very angry and never spoke about this incident. I was convinced that this was the work of my guardian angel once again. I've thought about this near-death experience over the years and wonder if sometimes different paths in our lives run simultaneously. In other words, maybe there is one version where I died and another version where I lived. Maybe these forks in the road of time happen every once in a while, and therefore we never really die. We just continue living on another path ad infinitum. Eventually, after many such experiences and forks, we finally reach old age and die, but only temporarily. Maybe then we return anew to start a new life, reincarnated. It's just a theory. I have no proof, just a hunch. Perhaps there is no death, and perhaps death is the greatest deception of all. I want to show you the illustration of me falling off the cliff and being rescued. That's Gary Dumm's fine illustrations. Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for listening and continue to support GoIndieNow and Joe Compton. Thank you.
Defoe, that you? Got another murder for you.
Mr. LaFoe? What brings you here?
I don't know who I am. You don't know who you are? You know who you are?
There are different versions of me in the world. I think someone's trying to kill me.
different victim, same body.
Everybody thought it was you.
Is he a relative?
What do you need? It's good to meet people.
Theodore Wax knows what happened to Daniel. If he really is at the Hotel Babylon, then I will find Theodore Wax.
You'd be wise to leave well enough alone with Mr. LaFoe.
Tampering tangles the tissue.
Who's there?
Come this way. You're a time traveler.
I was 20 years old. This beautiful girl. He appeared on the road out of nowhere. If it wasn't for you, we'd still be together.
The universe is not about you.
You look so much like him.
Parallel realities, quantum superpositions. You fragmented into about 7 different versions of yourself. One of them happened to be a psychopathic killer.
The past is a dangerous place.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Applegate and I am a paranormal romance author. I wanted to say a quick thank you to Joe and GoIndieNow for having me on to read an excerpt from my new paranormal romance called A Hunter Within. It is book 1 in a new duology that I am working on. So it's on Amazon and it's also available on Kindle Unlimited. If you're a KU subscriber, you can read it for free. The scene I am reading is from fairly early on in the book, so it's not too far into it. And without further ado, well, what do we have here? A raspy voice came out of nowhere from behind Sealy, and he turned around, speeding toward me before I could even register what was happening. Your Majesty. A man dressed in dark clothes came lurking out of the shadows a few feet from where Sealy had been standing moments before. He was flanked by 2 other men, both dressed in similar dark colors. It's an honor to finally meet you. The man bowed, but his tone held a mocking accusation. Sealy's arm was out, hovering in front of my body, warning me to stay back. I'm not sure who you have me mistaking for, but you should be on your way. Sealy's voice was authoritative and strong, unwaveringly bold. A snicker from one of the men behind their obvious point guy came, followed by a snake-like voice. Don't bother, Sealy Ronan, he spat out. We know exactly who you are. Instinctively, I reached up and grabbed at Sealy's jacket. The man's snaky voice made me nervous, and Sealy seemed to be trying to protect me from something. Great thinking, Jules. Grab the loony sex god who thinks he's a freaking vampire. If you go quietly, you will go alive. Sealy's voice came out cold, and I let go of him. For a brief moment, I thought maybe he was what he said he was. I shook my head, trying to rid that thought right out of my mind, and started taking a few steps back. Whatever this was, I shouldn't be a part of it, and it was dangerous enough where Sealy hadn't wanted me near these men in the first place. Perhaps he could hold them off long enough for me to run to the car and get help to save us both. We weren't that far from the parking lot. The leader lunged towards Sealy and I ran as quickly as I could, only to be grabbed from behind. I screamed, but a hand clamped down over my mouth. It was dirty and stank of death. I bit down hard, but that just made the man holding me howl in laughter. You can't hurt me, girl. He still had me in his arms and swung me around, facing me back toward the other 2 men and Sealy. I watched in awestruck horror as Sealy easily and with inhuman speed fought off the snake-like talker. The man lay at his feet in mere moments. The leader became furious at the ease at which it was now just 2 against 1. 2 against 2 if you counted me, but I'm sure no one did. Now we'll have to take your girl's life here as payback for that, he snarled. Let her go, she has nothing to do with this, Sealy demanded, seeing me in the arms of the other goon. The man who held me put his nose up to the inside of my hairline. She smells interesting. What are you? He asked, and I shuddered. Get your filthy hands off of me. I spat as soon as I spoke. Oh, I like 'em feisty. Maybe I'll keep you instead. After all, Gabriel's no fun for me, he said, watching Sealy closely as he spoke, but leaving his disgusting mouth near my ear. Sealy lunged towards the man holding me. His eyes were no longer the ice blue I'd come to be so entranced by. Instead, they were dark, practically black. His lips were curled back in a snarl, and I saw his teeth, elongated and shining as the moon hit them. I was smashed onto the ground in seconds, and Sealy was fighting off the man who held me, but the leader was coming at me now. He grabbed me by the throat and flung me backwards. No, Sealy yelled. I was soaring through the air and slammed into a rock wall formation surrounding a beautiful garden area. My head smashed into the stone and I immediately felt sick. My chest tightened and it was almost as painful as my head. My vision blurred, but I watched Seely tear through the last goon. A boot kicked me in the ribs and I coughed, forcefully and unintentionally. Seely was yanking the boot and the leader it belonged to away before it could hit me again. I saw Seely look over at me and I thought there was a panic in his eyes. The leader was behind him and I tried to yell a warning, but no sound came out. Seely winced in pain and it looked as if something was slammed into his back. I closed my eyes. There was a darkness creeping into my vision that wasn't natural. I moaned. A warm trickle of liquid ran onto my neck. I tried to get up, but I couldn't move. My eyes were getting heavier, and opening them to see anything going on around me was nearing impossible. And then I knew. I was dying. I wasn't afraid, and yet I wasn't totally calm either. I was stuck somewhere in between. It was like a trance of some kind. I wasn't experiencing any emotion, just knowledge that this was it, and the slow shutdown of my body. Like I said, A Hunter Within is on Amazon now and part of the Kindle Unlimited program if that caught your fancy at all. Thank you again for having me, and I hope you guys are having a great summer.
The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here." You will love again the stranger that was yourself. Give wine. Give bread. Give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the letters, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.
Hello, my name is Susanna J. Linton, and I'm a writer of fantasy and urban fantasy. My latest novel, Secret Burdens, came out July 20, and it is an epic fantasy, the third book in the Stories of Lore series. Very mysterious, spooky cover to go with a mysterious and spooky plot. The description reads, Jarrett failed everyone close to him. In disgrace, he resigned his position as captain of the Royal Guard and entered self-imposed exile in Lorth's eastern forests. As a common soldier, he fought the remainder of the sorcerer Marduk's monsters. However, after an assassination attempt leaves her bedridden, Clara summons Jarrett back to the capital city of Bertrand. Over his protest, she appoints him captain of the Seer's Guard. Though both her parents and her ability to see the future are restored to her, neither of these things can help her find her would-be killer. There's also a greater threat on the horizon she must face, and she needs someone she can trust. Jarrett searches for both Claire's enemies and his sense of honor. However, his investigations threaten to expose secrets that could ruin them all and shake Lorth to the core. The electrifying third novel of the Stories of Lorth series takes the reader from the immaculate halls of the palace to the dingy streets of the low quarters on an epic tale of secrets, betrayals, and lost love. The moment the door closed behind Jarrett, Clara slumped into her pillows. The headache thumping in her skull increased in tempo. The conversation with him, though, was worth the pain. She'd been worrying about him. "My lady?" Melody stood. "Shall I send for Lady Thalia?" "No." Harmony poured more water into the goblet. "May I speak freely, my lady?" "Have I ever told you not to?" Clara rubbed her eyes. "You should have told Captain Jarrett about the vision." "I will. It needs to be the right moment, that's all. He can't help you if he doesn't know." Clara wanted her to be quiet. She wanted everyone, everything to be quiet and stop moving. Even the rough embroidery of the pillows propping her irritated. The shadows whispered again, their words muffled and unintelligible. She grit her teeth. "I need one of Mother's tonics." Maybe she should tell Jarrett the truth right away. No one enjoyed being used. Clara knew that from experience. However, the idea of telling him the whole truth made her more ill than the agony tearing through her skull. It was fine to tell Mother, or Harmony, or Melody. They had no real influence on what happened in the palace or in the kingdom. They were confidants and friends, but to tell Jarrett, it would become official. Also, Jarrett would try to talk her out of what she needed to do. She wasn't sure she could withstand that, if her resolve could remain strong. But if he agreed with her, that was worse. A war raged inside of her now. Part of her knew she was right, and part of her wanted so much to be wrong. A wooden cup was pressed into her hand. She opened her eyes. A stranger stared at her with deep blue eyes. He wore his red blonde hair in a braid draping over his shoulder. The traces of a beard graced his chin and upper lip. A breeze, heavy with the promise of snow, swept over them. Slowly, he leaned forward for a kiss. With a gasp, Clara jerked back. The cup clattered to the floor, spilling dark liquid into the rich carpet. "My lady?" Harmony stared at her with concern. "Are you all right? Melody, fetch a rag to clean this up." "I'm fine." She scrubbed her face with both hands, even as hot tears pricked her eyes. "I'm fine." But the shadows whispered words she couldn't make out, and a pressure weighed on her as if everything around her was a mere veil. And the future, or the past, or another reality altogether yearned to come through. "I need Mother," she whispered. Melody dropped the rag she'd been using to mop up the mess and ran out of the room. Harmony sat beside her and took her hand. Clara gripped it until her knuckles turned white. To find out more, go to my website, SusannaLinton.com, and you'll find links to all the places where this book is sold. It's sold on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and more. Thank you, Joe, for having me, and y'all have a great day.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard White, and I'm going to be reading a new poem from my upcoming book, Shattered Glass, called Tango Down. Tango down. Every time I turn the corner, I hear it in the distance. I see myself kneeling in the desert. My body tenses. Tango down! I hear my radio and I confirm. I close my eyes, I see the faces. I can still remember the places. I tense up again and hear it all once again. Bravo down, I need a medic. He's my friend. Medic! I open my eyes and I'm in a different place.
You alright? Baby, it's me.
I jump, startled, nothing to fear. Yet still I hear the distant scream. I drift off again and I see it all again. All of the places that I have been. Hands and heart go tense. Tango down! I scream.
Richie, are you okay?
Voice is louder now.
Wake up!
She screams. I curl up at the edge of the bed, sheets soaked with sweat. I'm in a different place again.
Are you alright?
frightened, I don't know what to say. I've seen her face before. I've seen the fear before. There are no more tangos, no threats. But the ghosts are there, following me in my head. All I want to do is lay in my bed and get some rest. If you like the reading Tango Down from Shattered Glass, you can find me on my new Patreon, where I am sharing a lot of the poetry from Shattered Glass and some of my upcoming poetry in the future. You can find me patreon.com/Richard White. Thank you for tuning in and listening to Tango Down from Shattered Glass.
There's something going on with you. I'm coming over tonight. Call her, Ashley. She's here.
Mom?
Ask her again.
Mom, are you here? Please, Mom, I'm begging you. I want you in my life. Will you please come back to me? I love you, please.
In the name of Jesus Christ, tell me your name. I am God.
Mission complete. Let's take it to the house. Whew, thanks. I owe you one.
So you went to school for screenwriting, and how did you go from that to being in the comic book industry?
I went to school for screenwriting, loved every second of it.
It was the Conservatory of Arts and Film at SUNY Purchase in New York. And right off the bat, the year that I graduated, I hooked up with an animation company, and we were going to do an animated series.
Nice.
We're going to pitch it around. It got all the way to MTV, because in MTV Europe they had like a sci-fi channel.
Nice.
So we were going to do an hour-long animated sci-fi series.
Wow.
Right? So I think of sort of like Game of Thrones, where we do 10 episodes, an hour a piece. And this is going back to 2005. 2006, we started developing this thing. Everything was going well, but we had this one executive who was really championing the project, who ended up leaving the company, getting hired by Disney. And then every project that was on his plate got put on the shelf, including mine. And that was heartbreaking, because I put a lot of energy into that. I even put my own money into the production as well, because I was one of the producers. And it just went away. And I wasn't even allowed to touch it for, I think the limitation was like 10 years.
Wow.
And that was because even though I put money into it, I didn't put a lot comparatively to the big studios. I was just a kid out of college. But because I wanted to be a producer, I had to put some in. That was part of the contract, that it basically wouldn't belong to me anymore. I would do all the work. I created a production Bible and everything. So having said that, I still wanted to tell the story, that particular story. So I had the idea to make a comic book to tell the same story. Even though I couldn't touch that animated project, there was nothing in the contract saying I couldn't make a comic book.
Nice.
So I created Iron Age Productions for that purpose, to make the comic book. Cut my teeth on making comics on that first issue. Never really did anything with it, mostly because I didn't know how. I was so focused on the creative process, and I was used to, with this one venture in animation, other people taking care of the business end of it. I didn't know what to do with this product once I was done with it. So I was happy that I was finished with it, didn't know what to do with it, submitted it to a couple of comic companies without following up, without knowing what I was doing. And of course I didn't get any feedback at all. And I kind of just let it go for a little while. I said, well, that didn't work either. But at least I have this physical comic in my hand. And that was called Crusaders. That was a lot of fun. And then I didn't want to give up on writing and making stories. But I wasn't about to pick up and move out to LA, because I had already started a family here in New York. So I said, well, can't just go to Hollywood. I don't know how to get jobs like that anyway. I wouldn't know the first thing how to do it unless I went out there and learned, So I decided, okay, I'll stick with the military thing as my day job, and I'll just work on comics until I can figure them out. And it took a long time, but I'm finally at a place where I have a production schedule. I have a huge team of artists that work with me that do excellent work, really amazing work. And we put together some quality stuff. Actually, we just funded Jaded on Kickstarter successfully, which is really cool.
So what is your writing process like? Are you someone who pantses, or do you plot heavily? How do you, I would imagine with the comic, because you have a collaboration and you have an illustrator, that there is a lot of planning prior to putting something out there. But in terms of the actual story and everything, how do you approach that process?
That's a really good question. I like to answer that with a little bit of a class on how just comics in general and the industry, how it's done. So there's two basic methods, and there's many people that blow these methods out of the water. But the two basic methods are called the Marvel method and the DC method, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
The DC method of comics writing is the writer is king, sort of like plays, right? Plays versus movie writing. So the writer's going to write that script from soup to nuts, detail every single thing that's going on that page, from camera angles to what's happening on the first panel, on the left side of the panel versus the right side of the panel, everything. And that writer is responsible for it all. And the artist is responsible for interpreting that to his or her best ability, and providing that to the writer or the editor to make sure it matches up with the script. Marvel method, which was developed by Stan Lee, and it's really the only reason that there's a distinction between the two, which was more fluid in that Stan had so much. Everybody knows Stan Lee created all those characters. One of his tricks for writing was to not write. His trick was to give a very brief plot, like a synopsis, hand that to the artist. The artist would then do layouts for an entire comic, the whole thing. And in some cases, like with Jack Kirby, people he trusted, they would draw the whole comic without a single line of dialogue ever having been written. Okay, and then Stan would look at the picture and say, "Oh, I think this is what would happen," and then fill it all in afterwards. So that is the true core of the Marvel method. Not saying that that's still how they do things today over at Marvel Comics, but those are the two drastic sides of the spectrum for writing comics. And I think I fall somewhere in the middle in that I do start for myself with a basic plot, and then I don't go crazy with the dialogue. I do write dialogue, but I'll just do panel directions, which in screenwriting would be called screen directions. I do panel directions and then very light on the dialogue. And that's what I'll send over to the artist. And as he does layouts, once I see the layouts, I'll have a better idea what I want those characters to say in more detail.
With film, with novel writing, there is, written rules about you can't have one page have one line. And so I'm wondering, with comic books, what are some of the rules that you like to follow? Is there a certain thing about you shouldn't have, if you have this many panels in this one page, you shouldn't have this many? Is there a symmetry to it? And how much of that do you like to follow?
I would say of all the media that I've written and learned about writing, I would say comics is the most adaptable.
Nice.
Akin to playwriting, because in plays the writer is king, and they can sort of take on any format they want when you think about it. For the most part, playwriting is a general format, but any playwright can blow that out of the water. And it's the same with comics. However, there are certain tropes in comics, as there is in any media, and in comics there's also certain expectations of the reader. For example, unique to comic books, there's something that people who don't write comics may not have thought of, but unique to comic books, there's something about turning the page, the physical turning of the page, that you don't get, you don't have to worry about in novel writing. You don't worry about it on the screen, but what's going to happen when I turn that page in the scene? So you actually have to think about that when you're writing. If I'm on an even numbered page, even numbered pages are on the left. That's a page turn. And an odd number page is on the right. So it sounds very simple, but you have to decide, all right, if I'm going to reveal, and let's use a common comic book slash, melodrama trope, this character is a long lost twin brother, right? So somebody lifts a mask to reveal it's a long lost twin brother with a scar across his face, right? You don't do that on an odd number page. You do that on an even number page. You want it to be a page turn. You want it to be like a holy crap moment. And moments like that, you usually want a full page. It's called a splash.
That being said, for someone who has been trained in screenwriting, who obviously probably had a lot of time listening and developing the 3-act structure, do you look at it linearly as a 3-act structure for every page? Do you look at it for one comic? Do you look at it for the entire series? How do you navigate your mindset with the 3-act structure?
Not everybody does it this way, but I think what's most common is that you take your story arc, and once you determine how long your story arc is going to be, whether it's 4 issues of comics, 6 issues of comics, or 12 issues of comics, you break that story arc in a plot synopsis into 3 acts. So if let's make it easy. Let's say it's 9 issues, right? So 3, 3, and 3. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Gotcha. But what I do on top of that is within the comic book, so that the issue itself is enjoyable, I have a 3-act structure within that single issue as well. So I have to determine what does a character want in the beginning of the issue versus what happens at the end of the issue. Is there a character turn? Unlike novels and unlike movies, you can't have every issue. You can't have character change in every issue. Even though I'm a strong believer in characters don't always have to change. And I hear it a lot when I listen to podcasters, when I listen to people talking about movies, for example. Everybody's like, oh, this movie was terrible because the character had no change in the end. Well, who said that was a rule?
Right.
Who said? Somebody sat in a film class somewhere or in a novel writing class and somebody told them that that's how it has to be. No, generally, sometimes the better choice at the end of a story is that character didn't change because they can't, because because that's life. Because there's somebody in your life that you want to change, and that's who you're writing about. You want so desperately for them to change. And the story is about them having every opportunity to change and not being able to. And how much worse does that affect the people around them? Maybe that's the ending to that story because you want that lesson to be learned.
What do you love about being indie?
Everything. Most important of which, not having to worry about fitting my story into the construct of another entity.
Nice.
Not to say I don't want to be edited. As a matter of fact, I finally got an editor. She's really talented writer herself. Her name is Mina Elwell. She writes some comics. That I think is very, very helpful to any writer, to have somebody, whip them back into shape if they're going off course. That's important. But having the final say on what can go in my comic versus what's not allowed to go in my comic or in my story is so, so important to me. So in my story, for example, I get real deep and serious about certain tough topics.
Nice.
There's one particular topic that I deal with, spousal abuse and child abuse, and one of the characters witnesses that stuff and has to deal with it on an emotional level, and it manifests itself into her powers later on. I don't think I would have been able to do something like that in a Marvel comic or a DC comic. Down the line, if I ever get to write for those companies, of course, it'll be a different story. But being indie, I have the ability to leave that stuff in.
As a veteran of Comic-Cons and festivals and such, you've done a few of them now. Tell us something that you wish you had been told from the beginning that you had to learn the hard way.
You really need to have a game plan going to any convention. But the more expensive the more expensive the booth is, the more you really have to weigh the value of going. So I think what I'm really getting down to, what I wish somebody would have told me is, decide before you get to the convention what your purpose is. Are you there to make money, to make a living, or are you there to market? Because if you're trying to do both, I think you're going to fail at both.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to focus on one or the other. And if you're just going to market somewhere, or if you're just going to cut your teeth and decide what you really need to do, maybe going to New York Comic Con as your first con and spending $3,000 on a booth. Who does that? This idiot right here. It's not the best way to go.
Just to give in, indulge in the secrets, this mental labyrinth confines. I dreamed inside the dragon's mouth, chimeras, flowering hair, a flame drowned in the bliss, the scent, the taste of me. Unloose this self-destructive fantasy, abandon all memory of giving in, and you've let me out.
You know, that opening intro that I so admire and put together to honor the 10th anniversary of Breaking Bad, to me, that's the most interesting moment in the entire Breaking Bad series. It's the moment in which Walter White turns into Heisenberg and never looks back. He has moments where he becomes Walter White again, and Walter White creeps in there and he has vulnerable moments like that. But when that moment, when he turns to Skyler and becomes Heisenberg, and she sees it, and it's just like he knew he could never go back, and he just embraced that part of him. And it grew, as it grew stronger and Walter White grew weaker, you could see the dichotomy and the duality of these two personalities dueling for their space within Walter's head. It's very, very fascinating to me as an artist. It is something that I explore a lot in my own art. And I just think the reason why it speaks to me is because as artists, we're constantly fighting that. It is something that you have to temper. You have to learn that. Sometimes we jump in and we go full bore and we don't pump the brakes, or in fact, you shouldn't even pump the brakes, you should just slow down. And we don't slow down sometimes, and we just go, and then we run out of gas. And that can be the biggest life lesson for an artist, just to pull back and to know when to cruise in. Let your artistry sink in. Let it push forward. It will if you allow it. And that's, I think, the greatest lesson that I learned from a series like that, and great writing and great artistry. Every time I meet an artist here and talk to an artist and I see that in them, it's comforting. It makes it real. It makes it just like, okay, I'm doing the right way, I'm doing the right thing. And so I hope that with this show, that's what you get from it. I mean, whatever you get from it is whatever you get, and I appreciate all of that, and I hope that you continue to get that from this show. And if you do that, you'll be successful, because ultimately you'll find how it works for you, because it doesn't work the same way for me that it does for you. And that's the cool thing. And I think we did a very good job in this episode of showing that diversity of the folks who have found their footing and have kind of done it a different way, each of them. Well, that is our show, and we have so much more to show you coming up. We've got some great things going on. Of course, GoIndieNow is evolving as well, and we have some awesome things that we'll be doing in the future coming up here in the next month. And beyond that, it's going to be a great ride